This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
We're talking power, control, authority today on this episode of the show. Welcome to Real Talk from our home province of Alberta, our studio in the capital city of Edmonton, just blocks away from the Alberta legislature. In just a moment, a one-on-one with Jeremy Appel, an independent journalist who in this month's edition of Alberta Views has penned an unflinching look at how Premier Danielle Smith and her UCP government are moving to consolidate authority from healthcare to education to professional regulators. But what's the bigger picture here? Is this about efficiency? Is it about ideology? Or is it about something else entirely? Jeremy Appel coming up in 1 minute. We want to let you know this episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Relo, where better real estate training starts. You can find them online at relo.ca. This is real estate learning for the bold and ambitious, regardless of where you're at in your career. You may be starting out. This may be the first day of the rest of your professional life. Relo's going to help you find the next level. They're the only real estate school that sets you up with a professional practice network and professional development webinars. And because you're hearing about this on Real Talk, you have a chance to save a couple of $100 if you're signing up for the residential and commercial real estate bundles. Make sure you use the promo code Ryan100. That's all one word, $100 off each of those with that promo code. Relo's all about value. That's why they've added a smorgasbord of extras to each course they offer, including full access to their resources and tools. You can learn more again at relo.ca. That's RELO.ca. That's Alberta's top online real estate school. Jeremy Appel is an independent journalist. You probably know him as the guy who writes that Orchard newsletter on Substack. He's also the author of the book Kennyism, Jason Kenney's Pursuit of Power, and he's the author of this feature, Democracy, Feature, and Policy, in the newest edition of Alberta Views, the UCP Want More Control. Jeremy, welcome to Real Talk. It's nice to have you joining us this morning.
Great to be here, Ryan.
Yeah, what prompted the piece? What was the moment where you said, I got to start writing about this?
Well, I think the Premier talks a lot about things like freedom and democracy and how she is an enthusiastic supporter of both, in that, I opened up the piece with a quote from an interview she gave with Rick Bell last year in May, in which she says, I don't think there's such thing as too much freedom. Like, everyone should just have the maximum amount of freedom, which, sounds nice, fits on a bumper sticker, but what does that mean in practice? And at the same time, you're seeing this increased consolidation of power in the provincial government's hands. And there was a trilogy of legislation the Premier passed last year, focusing specifically on municipal governance and increasing the province's power over how municipal elections, which are coming up this year, are going to be run, and what the province can do in relations to municipalities. But this, I saw it as really an authoritarian power grab that the province was engaged in. And this isn't, as you noted in your introduction, this isn't limited to municipalities, right? This has implications across the board. But I thought that this was a really striking contrast with the Premier's rhetoric about freedom, right? Because it sounds nice, but freedom for whom? right? We have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I think that there's been, I mean, we'll take a look, and you and I will do this and kind of go through the UCP's record through that 2024 legislative session. I think probably one of the moves that probably grabbed most people's attention was this signature Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. And it caught a lot of people's attention, number one, because of the use of the word sovereignty, which always grabs people's attention when you're talking about provinces and a province's relationship within Confederation, or the relationship with the federal government. But of course, you know that Danielle Smith, the Premier's messaging on this, was always that this was protection against federal overreach, right? That Alberta knew what's best, or Alberta knows what's best for Alberta. Is that something that you're just not convinced on? You think there's something more to that?
Well, I mean, I do think the Premier is genuinely convinced that Alberta is surrounded by hostile actors, namely the federal government, but also within the province who represent the federal government's interests and are seeking to suppress this traditional Alberta conservative mentality, right? But the response to that is, okay, so let's just increase the power of this provincial conservative government and do things that the Premier's criticizing the federal government for doing, right? In terms of grabbing up power and trying to impose its will on municipalities and other bodies like Alberta Health Services, post-secondary institutions, the K-12 education system, the Alberta, the Canada Pension Plan, and all these sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, in terms of what motivates the Premier, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but I mean, I'm not, I don't know what goes on in her mind, but I do sense that she does genuinely believe the narrative that she is putting forward.
The Alberta Priorities Act, that was Bill 18, and we'll work together to get people up to speed on this. I don't expect everybody to remember every single government bill. It's virtually impossible to do. But this was an interesting one because this was essentially clapping back. This was the Alberta government clapping back at municipalities that were working directly with the federal government to get things done, right? In particular, to secure funding. And that's something that the federal Liberals had adopted, not just in Alberta, but across the country, in particular in things like funding for affordable housing. I think that the feds were finding it easier, and probably it was easier, to work directly with municipalities. And I know for many municipalities, many cities across the country, that had been a relief in some way, shape, or form. It was a way to fast-track funding on something that is an immediate concern to people across the country, but an issue that's exacerbated, the issue of that housing crunch, that affordability crunch in a lot of cities. The Premier had enough of that, and I don't know if it was probably, to be real, in part because it's a federal Liberal government, because, Danielle Smith, though she can speak with and work with Justin Trudeau, I don't know that there's any love lost between the two of them. But I thought Bill 18 was a pretty significant one, where the province of Alberta and this UCP government said, the money's going to go across our desk. We're going to be determining what the provincial priorities are, and municipalities will not be able to work directly with the feds to secure, in some cases, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. Why was that significant to you in particular?
Well, I think it's a clear outgrowth of the Alberta Sovereignty Act, right? Declaring that Alberta is going to be the main decision maker here in Alberta, and the federal government is going to be shut out if the provincial government deems its funding efforts are not in line with what the province wants, right? And the increase of executive power in the province is common in both pieces of legislation, Bill 1, which was the Sovereignty Act, and Bill 18. But I think what's most concerning about Bill 18 isn't so much the implications for municipalities, which is, again, going to create a lot of red tape and headaches as a result of it, but it's actually for academic freedom, right? Like Smith was explicitly going after the tri-agency that funds academic research in Canada, claiming that it has a progressive bias, that it's reflective of the federal government's political agenda. And in so doing, saying that the province wants to interfere with the way research funds are dispersed in the province and make it reflective of political priorities, which is not how it works, as it is. And I think Smith claimed that as proof that the academic research is biased towards the left is that there are more liberal commentators graduating from journalism school than conservative commentators. And I found that somewhat amusing coming from Smith, who, of course, was a Calgary Herald columnist for a very long time. And I think if you look at the landscape in Alberta media and Canadian media, I mean, it's overwhelmingly conservative when we're talking about commentary, when we're talking about people who are actually allowed to freely express their opinions and not have to sort of beat them out of themselves and just report what other people say. I mean, it's overwhelmingly conservative. I mean, it's not a secret. You look at major newspaper endorsements in every federal election going back past 30 years. I mean, everyone but the Toronto Star endorses the Conservatives.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
it gives me no pleasure to point out that there's barely any decent commentary left, and that the national the landscape of legitimate political commentators or experienced or insightful political commentators that provide any form of value have dwindled and died on the vine. I'm not happy to see that. I don't think that's a good thing. I do think, though, and is it fair to say that there's a sort of a common theme, and it's certainly not limited to Alberta nor Canada, that post-secondary institutions have kind of bent the knee. This is how Dr. Jordan Peterson went from being a psychology professor to one of the world's most followed podcasters, most well-read authors, most in-demand public speakers, and the like, is because he pushed back at the University of Toronto on what he felt was, and these are my words, not his, but kind of left-wing overreach. I do think that it's obvious to anybody that pays attention, demonstrations that happen on university campuses related to the plight of Palestinians, or to Israel's war against Hamas, or to like take your pick on what you're talking about. There is kind of a sense, generally speaking, or at least a loud recurring protest that universities have swung too far left. Pretty interesting to see, the University of Alberta president Bill Flanagan say that the University of Alberta is moving away from DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and they've come up with their own catchphrases. I'm not sure how different they actually are, but I do think that it was a signal, maybe to donors, maybe in a petro state like Alberta. I don't know, but it certainly was an intentional move on behalf of the U of A. Would you acknowledge it's not just Alberta?
Right, of course. I mean, this discourse exists, across the Western world, and is, I think, probably most prominent in the United States, right? As part of the broader culture war there, which I think seems to be where Danielle Smith gets a lot of her ideas from, is right-wing American media. And with regards to the University of Alberta, I think that decision to abandon DEI in favor of, I believe, ACB is accessibility, caring, and
I'm doing
what.
I'm doing a quick Google search so I can be accurate on this. On January 2nd, U of A President Bill Flanagan told the world, I'm referencing the National Post, told the world that his school, the mantra rather, they were replacing DEI with, yes, ACB. Why wouldn't you make it ABC? That drives me crazy. But access, community, and belonging.
Community right now.
Yeah, I wonder if access, belonging, and community flows just as well. Johnny, would you prefer it be ABC? It just seems to me to be a little bit. We're going. You could.
It rolls off the tongue.
It rolls off the tongue. The U of A could say we're going back to basics with access, belonging, and community. There you go. So I, to be honest, and I don't want to like sort of roll my eyes at the bigger picture. I just roll my eyes at some branding, some marketing firm was paid like $175,000. I'm making up the number before anybody freaks out, but somebody was paid like $175,000 to come up with that to replace DEI. Whether or not it actually, represents a formative shift in how the university promotes, tenured professors, or how it impacts, admissions into certain programs or financial supports or whatever, remains to be seen. But it is what it is.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to say about that is the UCP at their AGM late last year, relatively recently, voted in favor of a resolution to get rid of EDI programs or DEI programs, however you want to configure that acronym, from the public service. And so when I saw Bill Flanagan's op-ed saying that the U of A is getting rid of EDI, that was the first thing that came to mind. Is like, obviously he is, as you said, bending the knee to the UCP, whether consciously or otherwise.
So I know that, different mayors, and I'll reference your piece. If you're just joining us, the Real Talk live stream presented by California Closets across 7 different platforms. We're talking to Jeremy Appel, an independent journalist, a contributor to the most recent edition of Alberta Views. The UCP Wants More Control, the name of the piece. You can read it at albertaviews.ca. You reference Edmonton's mayor, Amarjeet Sohi, obviously a former federal Liberal cabinet minister, who criticized the UCP's efforts to interfere with direct dealings between municipalities and the feds. Wetaskiwin Mayor Tyler Gandam, including on this show on Real Talk, said the entire notion of provincial priorities, as you write, is a fraught concept, given the different needs of various municipalities. But where do you draw the line here? How do you draw the line, Jeremy, when it comes to seeking control this government over various systems in Alberta? What represents legitimate government reform, and what represents political overreach? Like where do you draw the line down the middle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of the powers that the UCP has acquired through this sort of trilogy of legislation targeting municipalities last year already exist, but in a lesser fashion. Like the ability to, if we move forward to Bill 20, the sort of centerpiece of this crackdown on municipal governance, the ability to remove city councilors or other municipal officials already exists, right? It's just that there's a process that the provincial government needs to go through to make that occur. If you look at, say, what happened in Chestermere, right, with the mayor and council there, I mean, there was the minister ordered an investigation. There was severe financial mismanagement of public funds that the investigation found, and the municipal officials targeting it had the opportunity to admit wrongdoing and reform their behavior, and they didn't, so they were dismissed. Right now, what the province has done has made it so if they deem a municipal official as not doing their job well, they can target them with a recall petition, which does, I think, have a chilling effect on. And originally, the legislation was just going to allow the province to dismiss municipal officials based on this vague criteria. Because of criticism, the province responded to that and made it so they can just they can initiate a recall petition. But again, that has an impact on how city and town councillors and mayors in Reeves are going to act, because they know if they step out of line, the province can get their local supporters riled up for a recall petition, similar to, what we saw in Calgary with Jody Gondek.
Yeah. Which went nowhere, but it'll be interesting to see how that influences the next municipal election for sure. For people that aren't familiar,
was, I think, the point.
Yeah, exactly, 100%, Jeremy. The Chestermere situation's an outlier for sure, and it's absolutely wild. For people that aren't familiar, I'll reference reporting here by the Calgary Herald. This was pretty crazy. Jeff Colvin, the former mayor of Chestermere that was ousted in disgrace, quite frankly, Deloitte tested 268 transactions on his credit card. I'm sure you're familiar with these numbers. More than $50,000 in questionable expenses, 96% of them for meals, with tip amounts in some cases between 50 and 100%. Half of those meal expenses, 44% of them, included costs for alcohol, with approximately $4,000 in booze purchases alone. So $53,000 in expenses on a city-issued credit card, about $24,000 a couple of years ago, $29,000 last year, more than double the average mayoral expenses from 6 other municipalities that Deloitte looked at. Other questionable expenses that were deemed violations of city policy, the mayor getting his personal piano moved to City Hall, the purchase of an international flight for a city employee's spouse, a counselor's registration for political party fundraising. I mean, this is wild. I don't know that we don't probably want to, nobody wants to hold that up as an example of provincial overreach if there's some sort of investigation into this, because Chestermere's mayor was obviously running hog wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's old school political corruption.
For sure.
And I think what I want to emphasize is that, of course, the province has a role to play in providing oversight of municipal governments. That is undeniable. If the province isn't going to do it, who else is? The issue, as I see it, is the UCP's efforts to impose its political will on municipalities and ensure that more like-minded political leaders are elected. And those who aren't like-minded just watch what they do very closely, because they don't want to have a recall petition initiated against them from above, which is interesting too, because, again, the whole idea of the recalls, right, when Jason Kenney permitted them in 2017, I believe it was, is that supposed to be grassroots. It's that locals are fed up with how their representation is representing them. And
we're talking to Jeremy Appel. Jeremy, hang tight. Your mic dropped out for a second there, but we've got in our Real Talk live chat now, powered by Park Power. We've got a ton of people that want your take on AIMCO. Obviously, there's like major changes happening there. There's talk of an Alberta pension plan. I've been on the record since the very beginning saying I don't think that this is ever going to happen. The Premier herself, I think, has gone on the record within the last month saying she would vote for it. She still wants it to happen, but I don't think she's so sure that it's going to happen either. There's a major overhaul happening at Alberta Health Services, including a new CEO, obviously. Big changes with municipal parties, political parties coming in ahead of the next municipal election. I want to put all of this in front of you, Jeremy. We're talking to Jeremy Appel, an independent journalist who's written a feature piece in the newest edition of Alberta Views magazine. You can read that at albertaviews.ca. More in just a moment. But first, I want to let you know that Edmonton Opera has something remarkable coming for you in the month of February. Experience the power of love and memory in Bluebeard's Castle, a profoundly moving opera from the Theatre of Sound in London. Judith's journey through Bluebeard's doors becomes a poignant exploration of dementia, identity, and the heart. This is directed by Daisy Evans with a new English libretto and music arranged by Stephen Higgins, a story that resonates deeply with anyone touched by memory loss. Don't miss Bluebeard's Castle, February 1st, 4th, 6th, and 7th at the Jubilee Auditorium. You can get your tickets today at edmontonopera.com. Our friends at North Road Investment Council want to remind you that if you are looking to secure your financial future, North Road Investment Council is here for you, whether you're planning for retirement, growing your wealth, or navigating complex markets. Their team of experienced experts will craft personalized strategies for investing, financial planning, insurance, and digital risk advisory. Not everybody does that. In fact, as far as we know, as far as we can tell, in the province of Alberta, they're the only ones that are leading the way on digital risk advisory. They're a steady hand and a studied voice. You can learn more about their 4 pillars, what makes them different, at northroadic.com. There's a big month or two coming up at UCAN Youth Services, and we are so proud to be supporting and partnering with this Edmonton-based nonprofit that works with young adults aged 18 to 24 to help them out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. They've got their comedy nights coming up in the month of March. I'm hosting a table one of the nights, bringing some friends. I'd love for you to consider doing the same thing from the 10th to the 12th. And the 17th to the 19th of March. They're also looking for silent auction donations. If you can help, I want to direct you to ucan.ca. Plus, mental health services. Specifically, I want to let you know that UCAN employs 2 in-house counselors providing on-demand appointments to help young people address mental barriers and anxieties pertaining to employment and life management. These are integral services, but they don't happen without our support. You can learn more at ucan.ca. And as we talk, I'm going to be talking to you about Jasper a little bit later on in this episode, about communities that are rebuilding after major setbacks. How can we not mention Complete Care Restoration? We're so proud to partner with this team that for more than a quarter century has been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. One of the best parts about Complete Care Restoration, they'll work directly with insurance companies to simplify the claims process for you so you can focus on what matters most. They'll guide you through every step of the restoration process, making it as stress-free as possible. Listen, don't wait for the damage to worsen. Contact Complete Care Restoration if you experience a setback like a fire, a flood, a sewer backup, or worse, and experience the peace of mind that comes with expert care. We're talking to independent journalist Jeremy Appel, his piece in Alberta Views, the UCP Wants More Control. Jeremy, it obviously gleaned national headlines. This Bill 20, the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, which probably as a headliner introduced municipal political parties ahead of the next municipal election. That's something that we'll be talking about more and more as 2025 plays out. Obviously, we've heard on this show different opinions on whether or not political parties will benefit people at a municipal level. I would say, generally speaking, the consensus is no. But in the context of the UCP wanting more control, that's what your piece asserts. Why was Bill 20 so significant?
Yeah, for various reasons. Of course, there's the introduction of political parties, which, in my view, in isolation isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's certainly something that can be debated. You look at Vancouver, Montreal, and they have political parties at a municipal level, and different parties are elected at different times. It's not like there's one that necessarily dominates municipal politics. But taken as part of this broader constellation, it does seem to be an effort to put the thumb on the scale for conservative municipal political parties. So I mentioned earlier the aspect of the legislation that allows the province to initiate a recall petition against saying municipal official, and how easily that can be weaponized against those the province doesn't agree with. But there's also the provincial government now has an ability to cancel bylaws it doesn't like based on, again, quite vague criteria, including that it doesn't fit with provincial priorities, which, does remind you of Bill 18, I think, in that all these funding arrangements from the federal government need to go past the province first to ensure that they're in line with what the province wants to do. And of course, the Alberta Sovereignty Act, which is, I think there's a reason it was the first bill that Danielle Smith's government passed when they came to power. Another significant development in Bill 20 is the reintroduction of corporate and union donations to local elections. I think that also will play a role in emboldening certain actors who are aligned with the government. The donation
Jeremy,
limit.
how do you feel about it personally? The donation limit's $5,000, right? So I think people that supported the green light again for the return of union and corporate donations, which were canceled by Premier Rachel Notley, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Rachel Notley got rid of union and corporate donations, probably in what was intended to be and maybe played out to be a savvy political move of her own, right? Like wasn't kind of the understanding among maybe would be or potential NDP voters, the potential swing vote, like the progressive conservatives, wasn't the idea that maybe they were a little bit concerned that unions had too much power, or unions had too much say in a Notley government or with the NDP, and so Rachel Notley got rid of union and corporate donations. Would you agree? And maybe when they came back, a lot of people that supported the move probably said, well, if individuals can donate $5,000, corporations or unions should be able to donate $5,000 as well.
Yeah, I and that was the first piece of legislation, if memory serves, that the Alberta NDP brought forward. And I think by including unions in that, which, obviously politically they had to do that.
Yeah.
It was a way of showing that we're not beholden to unions. We're not the old NDP. We are going to govern for all Albertans. I think that was the sentiment behind it. But the problem is, an unintended consequence of that was the proliferation of third-party advertisers, right? So unions and corporations can't donate to candidates directly, but they can donate to third-party advertisers who can do advertising for these candidates, right? So that was a significant loophole that the NDP left in the legislation. And I remember I did a piece on this sort of proliferation of third-party advertisers, which are often referred to as PACs, right? Political Action Committees, which is what they're called in the States. And I remember I did this piece for the Sprawl several years ago, and I spoke to Calgary City Councillor Shane Keating, who was saying, now former Calgary City Councillor, who was saying we need to bring back corporate and union donations because at least there's transparency there, right? But with third-party advertisers, I mean, they could donate unlimited sums to them. Jason Kenney, actually, when he came to power, put a very high cap on what people could donate to third-party advertisers, $30,000, which, I mean, most people don't have $30,000 sitting around they can donate to a third-party advertiser. Um, and but also, and I think this is important because this sort of preceded the what we're seeing now from Danielle Smith, is that Kenny forbade municipalities from passing bylaws that require third-party advertisers to disclose their donors before the election.
Right.
Right. And made it so they could only be disclosed 6 months after the election. So while this election's happening and you're being bombarded with these partisan ads, you can't know who's funding it until after the fact. Now, Smith, of course, has taken that much further. But I think that it's also important to recognize that there is an inherent power imbalance between corporate and union corporations and unions. I mean, even with the $5,000 donation limit, a union is strictly limited to those $5,000, right?
Yeah.
And it has to be approved by their membership in a vote. Corporations, on the other hand, though, I mean, it would also presumably be approved by their board. Someone who owns one corporation doesn't necessarily own just that one. They can own 10 corporations, right? And each one of those 10 corporations can give the limit. So while it's $5,000 per corporation, it's a bit misleading to suggest that business would just be able to donate $5,000 because the person who owns it could own several businesses who could all donate that limit.
Yeah,
right?
I'm kind of like waffling on this one, to be honest with you. I'm forming my own opinion on this in real time as you and I are talking. Part of me thinks if somebody owns like a number of different corporations, ostensibly employing a bunch of different people in a bunch of different fields, maybe they've earned the right, if they feel so led, to make political donations with that money that they're earning as contributors to the economy. If it's a shell game with a bunch of numbered companies that anybody can set up to funnel money through to political parties, then I think it's a different conversation entirely. I'm not sure that unions are getting approval from their members through votes on which political party they're going to support. I don't know if that's actually the case. I'm not a member of a union, so I don't know. But we do get letters from time to time, emails from union members who are unhappy. You know, they're swimming against the stream in their workplace. Their political values or their political affiliations do not align with that of their union, and obviously that's a kind of a bee in their bonnet for obvious reasons. And then on the PACs as well, the kind of the idea of dark money, and when you frame it as that, obviously, people should be concerned, and I think that our democracy is worth protecting. Obviously, I should say that more strongly than that. Democracy is integral to the freedoms that we enjoy, to the freedoms that Danielle Smith wants to pursue. Democracy and the value of democracy is a big reason why people give such a rip about stuff like this. And then part of me, and maybe it's just the talk show host in me, but part of me feels like if you have $30,000 and you want to have a say on how you feel about an issue, then fill your boots. It's a free country. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of commerce for the most part. You can do whatever you want. And I understand why that might not sit well with people, but I also think that's something that's kind of generally tough to argue against. What do you think?
Well, I think what you're getting at is there can often be a tension between, I think what Danielle Smith would refer to as freedom, meaning economic freedom, and right, the ability for people to spend their money how they see fit, and democracy, right? Because I mean, by allowing uh, people to spend these vast sums on third-party advertising, you are tilting the mainstream political discussion in the range of options in your preferred direction, which does have a corrosive impact, I think, on democracy on the ground. So I think that in general, if we want to have democratic elections, it needs to be as free from the influence of the wealthy and powerful as possible. I mean, you look at uh, some, public funding of elections, for example, which I know, Canada and BC and other provinces have a degree of. When you vote for a party, they get a certain amount of funding based on that vote. Um, but I think something like that keeps the discussion much more, I guess you could say, down to earth than just it being influenced by people with these vast sums of money who are going to spend it on causes that uh, benefit their material interests.
Alberta Girl in our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, says what Jeremy's basically saying is that oil executives that make millions of dollars a year can basically have their entire family donate the max, just like the good old days. Good to see Alberta Girl there in the chat. Jeremy, you've referenced Jason Kenney several times in this interview. We should mention again that you're the author. You released this book, I think, just what, like about a year ago. Kennyism, Jason Kenney's Pursuit of Power. You've written about power. You're writing about control. I'll acknowledge your Kenney book's a little bit more about his road to the leadership and forming government. But how would you compare or contrast the leadership styles, the priorities, the bases of support of Alberta's two most recent premiers, UCP Premier Kenney, UCP Premier Danielle Smith?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about a lot, especially since as I was writing the Kenney book, Smith was coming to power. And really, what I would say is deepening and expanding upon what Kenney did when he was in power. So I do think they're part of the same project, really, of this strengthening existing power relations in Alberta and entrenching corporate power. But I think the differences are quite interesting, and I think a big part of it is in their leadership style and in their personalities. Um, I mean, Kenney had this arrogance to him, and uh, you saw that during the COVID pandemic and the way he related to his caucus, where it was very top down. It was, I know what's best. I am key to getting us reelected. The party grassroots is a liability. They don't know what they're talking about. And I am this political mastermind from Ottawa who is at the same time railing against elites from Ottawa. That's sort of Kenney's disposition, and I think that led to his downfall. In that was really the key part of it, was this arrogance, this holding his base in contempt and seeing them as a liability. I think that Smith, on the other hand, has is much more, I think, ideologically flexible than Kenney. I think that she wants to be liked by the party grassroots that she represents, and is willing to do things, including things that I totally find abhorrent, like the policies around trans kids, that might be outside her comfort zone as someone who is very much a social libertarian, which is another difference from Kenny, who is a lifelong religious traditionalist conservative. But Smith will do what that part of the UCP wants, because she knows that they're an important part of this political coalition that Kenny built and fell apart under Kenny, and she brought it back together. But what we're seeing with municipal governments in particular, and Smith's approach to them, is definitely a deepening of Kenny's clampdown on them. Another aspect under Kenny with regards to municipal governance is and this applies across various sectors, is the cutting of municipal grants that you saw early in his tenure. I mean, they were just cutting and cutting and cutting. Smith hasn't really done that yet, which is surprising given her previous views about how government needs to be small, it needs to spend less, and all that. Though once the Trump tariffs kick in, if he follows through with them, yeah, I agree. I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. And our economy has responds to that with a downturn, then I think we'll probably see some major cuts. And I don't think municipal grant funding will be spared from that at all, because I think it's another way that the province can wield its leverage over municipalities.
Yeah, we'll see about that. If people want to hear more on Danielle Smith responding, she acknowledged. I talked to her on December 19th. People can check out that episode in our archive on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I asked her if she's concerned or brace. I don't remember the exact language I used, but something like, are you bracing for a potential deficit budget 2025? She says yes. So if people want to hear more of the Premier's side on that, of the Premier's response, that's where they can find it. On a Real Talk live chat, interesting comments here. I appreciate this from Kenzie, who's watching us. Kenzie says, I think that the UCP is trying to right the imbalance, but they definitely don't get it all right. Rick's watching us live on LinkedIn this morning. What's up, Rick? He says, corporations don't vote, people do. To put a personal limit on contributions, the same for individuals, we can have the most fair election. He says, look at the American election, basically bought and paid for by capitalism and corporations. That from Rick, who's watching us on LinkedIn. Jeremy, before we let you go, your piece kind of, you touch on three pillars. And I encourage people to read it all today at albertaviews.ca. I encourage you to subscribe and to support independent journalism like what Jeremy's doing. But the third thing you focus on, you talk about Bill 18, you talk about Bill 20, and then you talk about Bill 21, which I think is relevant in particular. I mean, I was just talking about the complete care restoration. We're talking about wildfires. We're talking about natural disasters and emergencies. Bill 21, I think, was flying under the radar a little bit, to be honest with you, especially in comparison to the previous two we've discussed. But this essentially, in layperson's terms, allows the province to take over emergency or disaster response to basically big dog municipalities, right? Why is that so significant? And I mean, I guess understanding in a quest for control, you might be able to draw a direct line there, but why is this of concern to you, or why do you think this is something people need to pay attention to?
Well, I think this one is particularly interesting because if you recall, Danielle Smith really mounted her political comeback on the notion that the government had overreached in its emergency response to COVID. So it's interesting to see Smith now seek more power for the province in the case of emergencies, which again in itself debatable, like municipal political parties. Maybe it does help to have more centralized power in the case of emergency, like a wildfire, like a pandemic, and what have you. The problem is Smith was going around saying that this is what municipalities wanted, and the heads of Alberta municipalities and the rural municipalities of Alberta said, no, we didn't. None of us asked for it. We wanted more resources. We wanted more funding, but we didn't want the province to just seize control over our emergency response. And so again, as part of this broader constellation of the UCP's crackdown on municipal governance, I think this again plays a key piece, that it is essentially a power play. Like, just give the municipalities the funding that they're asking for, and work together with them, and let them respond to emergencies, because they are the ones with boots on the ground, or at least with more boots on the ground than the provincial government. Yeah, again, in the context of allowing more corporate money in elections, in blocking federal funding agreements with municipalities, in giving the province the power to revoke bylaws and to initiate recall petitions against municipal officials. It does paint a concerning portrait.
You can read Jeremy Appel's piece at albertaviews.ca. The UCP Want More Control. And a reminder, if you subscribe to Alberta Views, they make it nice and easy. You can see there in the top right of the page. Make sure you use the promo code AVRJ. That's Alberta Views Ryan Jespersen, to knock 50% off your investment in a 1-year subscription. That's 10 issues, hard copy, delivered to your door for like $20. Encourage you to support them. Again, that's albertaviews.ca. The promo code is AVRJ. Plus, you can read more of Jeremy's work and contribute to support independent journalism at readtheorchard.org. Jeremy, thanks for making time for us today. Thanks for getting us thinking. It's nice to see your face.
Likewise, great to be here.
Yeah, take care. That's Jeremy Appel. I should mention you can follow him on social media as well. Want to get to more of your comments on the Real Talk live chat. Everybody's all fired up. We got conversations coming about natural disasters. We got people talking about union and corporate donations. I'm looking at former Mayor Jeff Colvin's credit card expenses there. The $53,000 in credit cards on his city credit card, and they're saying like 96% of it was for meals, including alcohol. And I just think that's just yet another reason. You're smirking already. You know where I'm going with this. Why I could never run for politics.
I was just going to say.
Because if I had a credit card in my wallet, where do you think my meetings are going to be? My meetings are going to be over lunch. My meetings are going to be over dinner. My meetings are going to be at concerts and hockey games and everything else. And this is, I'm not making fun. It's no laughing matter. I mean, it's obviously when it's public dollars, they're saying the tips are between 50 and 100, like 100% tips. Like, you're the big shot in the bar, you're the big shot in the restaurant, tipping 100%, but it's on the city's, it's on
their dime.
Coming out of the municipal budget. That's an insane move to try to get away with.
Of course.
But I think also there are benefits to owning a private business.
Sure.
There are benefits to working outside of politics. Yeah. There are benefits to calling your own shots, because man, oh man,
of course.
I think if I had to be accountable to anybody for my expenses and having broken down like that by Deloitte, I'd be in big trouble.
Get yours. I mean, we're both, business owners, and we both know that if we're going to have a meeting, if we're going to go through and sit with a client or a potential sponsor, and it's going to be 45 minutes an hour, it's much more comfortable to do it in a restaurant, to have a glass of wine, to buy them a meal. But does that mean I take out my credit card and ding the percentage of the tip up to 100%?
Yeah, crazy.
Heck no.
Crazy.
And so when he's doing that, and on someone's dime.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't give a shit.
We should mention that Chestermere's all sorted out right now. They've got a new mayor, and I don't know if they're all sorted out. I can't say that much. But, we own a business in Chestermere. I think I've told you that before. We pay property taxes in Chestermere, if anybody's wondering. We're not allowed to advertise the business because it's in the cannabis space. But I can tell you that if you're ever looking for Canada's best cannabis, look for Joy Botanicals wherever you buy your weed, man. Our big facility is they're proudly built in Chestermere, just outside Calgary, and we're proud to be an Alberta-owned business. I want to get to some of your comments as well on DEI and the University of Alberta's move, and I saw a couple of great comments in there that I think are worthwhile of our discussion. I know for a lot of you, it's kind of interesting. Like the U of A acknowledged, and we'll get to Erica and Jillian's comments in just a bit, but President Bill Flanagan at the U of A acknowledged he basically said that like the concept said it's basically just a change in terminology as DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, was becoming known as more of a polarizing acronym. And I think that's safe to say because I even see what happens in our live chat. I know what happens anytime that we tweet about this. We did an interview here on Real Talk. It was a couple of years ago now with a workforce expert out of Ontario talking about where corporations are going with DEI. And she was sounding the alarm like 2 years ago, going, a lot of them they're not seeing this as worthwhile. It's kind of a bit of a distraction. Now, that's not to say that there need to be barriers removed, that's not to deny that there haven't been huge barriers in place. It's so obvious in many different fields, in many different industries, in many different professions all around the world that have obviously been directly related to the sexual orientation, the gender, the religious beliefs, the ethnicity of job applicants and the like. I mean, that's a fact. You can Google, and it's so easy to find case studies and theses and things like, people like I can think of an example we talked about on the radio many years ago about somebody that was having a really difficult time finding employment and how would you refer to it? It's going to be clumsy language here. I think I'm making up a word, but they like de-ethnicized their name. Like they changed their name. They basically like changed the name to like, Eric Jones or something like that on the job application instead of like Malik Muhammad or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like the name, they figured, I wonder if the reason I'm not getting job interviews has something to do with my name. This was a prominent story out of the United States. Probably, I'm going to say about 5, 6 years ago, they changed the name on their job application. All of a sudden started getting a bunch of calls back. So there is a need for reform there. That's obvious. Anybody who denies that doesn't know what they're talking about. But is the U of A's move a step in the right direction, or is it just more of the same? Like is ACB the same as DEI? I don't know. You tell me.
There's a lot of letters.
You let me know what you think. There's a lot of letters. At the end of the day,
A, B, C, D, E,
the professors that are either getting tenure or not,
Yeah.
the students that are either getting access to the programs or not, are going to be the ones ultimately, I think, whose personal stories can attest to whether or not the university is making any progress in that department. Before we go there, I want to take a quick break for some fun. I want to just take you into some of our experiences over this past weekend and encourage you to make your own Jasper memories through the month of January. This is a legendary festival, one of Jasper's longest running, Jasper in January. And I had a chance with my good buddy Bins, that's his nickname, we call him Bins, to head out to Jasper just this past weekend and spend some time in the crown jewel of the Canadian Rockies. I want to take you through what we did. This is just our personal weekend. You can make your own plans and you can learn more about it at jasper.travel/January. They've got it all laid out, the opportunities that lie in wait. There's literally something happening every single day, all across and around the town. But you know where we were going to start. As soon as we get that vehicle parked, as soon as we get it in place at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, we're going to go ahead and grab a maple old-fashioned in the Great Hall at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. That, as far as I'm concerned, with the fire burning in the background and that brandy-soaked cherry, or however they do that, with a little bit of maple tinge to it, Johnny. I go with no smoke. Some people like to get their old-fashioned smoke. Not me. I like to just go
smoke.
I go, no, we'll smoke Johnny's. That kind of sounds like a bit of a fun weekend, doesn't it? And I go no smoke on my maple old fashioned, but boy, did we ever have a wonderful time there. And then you know what happens? I get kind of like sucked into the couches there. Anybody that knows that's ever spent some time there in the main hall at the JPL knows that you can get really trapped in there. So I ended up having they had the ribeye on special, and I just thought nobody's going to do a ribeye in the Rockies better than the culinary team at the Fairmont JPL. We also had a chance to check this out. Check this place out. This is the Moline Range. This is a brand new distillery that's opened in Jasper. Their story is remarkable. You know, in the restaurant industry, they call it a soft open, where it's kind of like ahead of their grand opening, but they open the doors and then they give people an out. If you're like friends and family, or if you happen to be walking by and you see the doors unlocked, you can go in there. Johnny, their soft open was slated for evacuation day. Their soft open was July 22nd. Thankfully, this place escaped the flames, and their team is now back in action. This is an amazing rosemary gin and tonic. It's going to sound like all we did was drink this weekend. That's not 100% accurate.
But when in Rome.
But I want to give a shout out to the team at the Moline Range, because that is just, as far as I'm concerned, Jasper's culinary scene. It was already good, just absolutely exploded. Back to the hotel, into, as far as I'm concerned, the best hot tub in the mountains. This is just a top shelf hot tub experience. I can sit in the Jasper Park Lodge hot tub and watch that Canadian flag blow in the wind for hours and hours and hours, and that's pretty much exactly what we did on this wonderful weekend. Marmot Basin. This is a really, really neat. So this is Binns. He's making his cameo. I did ask for his permission to use this photo in this edition of My Jasper Memories. Opening the day with a Caesar. Attaboy. It was
before the run.
Bit of a tough morning for. No, this was like we had gotten our boards. You know, gotten some snow on the boards. We'd gotten some.
Well, let's see how he did.
We got our muscles moving, and here he is. This is Binns making his way through the bumps on the board. I posted this on my Instagram stories. You can follow me at Ryan Jespersen. And I got some notes from people saying, we didn't know he could move like that. A bit of a quad burner. The legs were burning out, but in the best possible way, and had so much fun on the lift. You know, like just quality time with friends and family. I just love those chairlift rides with friends that you don't always get to spend a lot of time with. We've all got our own family lives. We all got our own stuff going on. But the best part about Marmot, there's like never lift lines.
Yeah.
They've got the new lifts in. They've got that new knob quad. Which,
faster.
And I want to let everybody know, for the families too, there's a couple blue runs off the knob quad. So you can take the intermediate skiers and snowboarders in your family pretty much all the way to the top of the mountain and absolutely enjoy it. But we had so much fun.
How's like the remnants of what happened there?
Real Talk.
Yeah.
I did show you a video if you want to put it up there. So I know this is hard for some people to see. If you're listening on the podcast, this is worth checking out on YouTube.
This is a little.
It's tough to watch, man. It's tough to see them looking at this. You're going to see Pyramid Mountain in the background.
Still beautiful.
As I said, like, the fire took its toll for sure. There's no doubt about that. And there's parts of town that were absolutely leveled, and it's hard to see. But beauty abounds in Jasper. Beauty abounds. I'm not going to pretend like, you know, silver linings. I'm not going to use language like that, but there are new vistas. There's new views. The land is recovering. In the spring, we're going to see that fireweed pop up. We're going to see those trees start to come back. There's wildlife everywhere. We were lucky enough to see some wildlife. Those bighorn sheep, man, those rams. We were
crazy,
driving
right?
on Highway 16
Yeah,
like, on
and
our
they
way
just pop
back
up
out
and
of
you're
town.
like-
There's this one. There's like an F-350 coming the other way, and he's stopped, and we're stopped. And this ram is just standing in the middle of the highway, just staring at the pickup. I was like, bless you, man. But it's so good to see the wildlife back and healthy. And I just want to say to Real Talkers, I know that a lot of you may have been feeling like it was too soon to get out there, or you didn't want to head out there if the town couldn't accommodate it. The town of Jasper, the municipality, and the surrounding region is open for business, and they're ready. They're welcoming visitors back with open arms. January is just an absolutely beautiful time to head out there. Again, you can learn more about it. Design your own itinerary online at jasper.travel/January. You can check out the schedule. Like, they've got a ton of stuff going on. I didn't even mention the live music, all the live venues that we love, the Atha Bee, the Dead Dog.
I love the entertainment.
Like, they've got DJs going. They've got live bands. They have a street party coming up on the 25th. Even the 17th and 18th coming up this weekend, Mountain Malanka, for those that have been celebrating Ukrainian Christmas and now moving into Ukrainian New Year's. They do it in a really, really beautiful way. Plus, they have this ice climbing wall that they're building right in the middle of town. The team at Rockaboo Adventures is doing that one.
Cool.
So because Moline Canyon right now is access is limited and they're not able to welcome visitors like they typically have been. So they've constructed, these tourism operators in Jasper are doing an amazing job. An ice wall right in the middle of town that you can go and adventure on, and it's such a unique opportunity. Again, that's jasper.travel/January. Much love to everybody in Jasper that welcomed us with open arms. An unforgettable weekend with my buddy Bins. My Jasper Memories is proudly presented on Real Talk every Wednesday by our friends at Tourism Jasper. Yeah, Donna here in the live chat says it's so good to hear that there's still healthy wildlife. Says it feels like nobody was talking about that. Says Donna. So I assumed the worst. No, Donna, it's been remarkable. In fact, some of the really powerful photography that we were seeing, even a week or 2 weeks after that fire, seeing the grizzlies were back, the elk were back, and Bins and I were talking about this on our drive out there. It just seems like animals kind of have that sense. I'm not suggesting that down in California right now that there's maybe not some challenges and not some issues, but again, the intuition of these animals truly is remarkable. I wanted to jump back into the live chat here and get to a couple of comments on DEI, because I hate to plant seeds and then not let them grow and not get into the comments from our Real Talk live tuning audience. If you're just missing it, we had touched on with Jeremy Appel a story that surfaced about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, as campus groups started to respond to the University of Alberta basically ditching its DEI policies, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The president of the university, Bill Flanagan, saying that the U of A is moving ahead with access, community, and belonging. Erica in our live chat says DEI is being exposed for the insanity it embraces. A true meritocracy with equal opportunity is the only legitimate and sustainable path to equality. That from Erica. Meantime, Jillian shared this comment with us. She says, moving away from DEI because racists and misogynists don't like it is not the same as moving away from DEI because it's not beneficial. Jillian says most places are just changing the name and lots of places are doing this. And Jillian maybe doesn't spell it out, but I get the sense that that's the same thing that the University of Alberta is doing in rebranding its policy, right? I'll reference CTV News and their reporting on this. I want to always give credit to the news outlets that are taking the time to report on these stories. But Bill Flanagan, the president of the university, says that they officially renamed its policy to Access, Community, and Belonging after consultations with more than 1,000 members of the campus community, including students, faculty, and staff. He says we have to be frank that some of the language around DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, can be seen by some to be polarizing. But what's really driving this is not me, says the president of the U of A. It's not me reading the paper about what's going on in the U.S. This change in language originated from our own community. This was not a result of external matters. For context, in the U.S., diversity programs have been a source of ire since a 2023 U.S. Supreme Court decision declared race-based affirmative action programs in colleges were unconstitutional, and a wave of diversity offices on American campuses, in particular in Republican states, have been shut down. And then there's big corporations as well. McDonald's and Walmart, two of the biggest corporations in the world. Walmart is the biggest corporation in the world, essentially, have also halted their diversity initiatives. Opponents to them saying that the practice actually leads to discrimination and promotes left-wing ideology. Supporters of it say, well, it's leveling the playing field for women and for people of color. So the UCP here in Alberta has signaled its support for an anti-DEI movement. I don't think that that's a surprise to anybody. A policy proposal that passed at their AGM in November in Red Deer reads, any post-secondary institution that maintains a DEI office, policy, or equivalent shall lose government financial support. And I think that it's probably common sense to draw a direct line between that policy and the University of Alberta's move.
Sure, yeah.
In a day and age where over successive governments, and they're not the only ones. Like, let's not let previous governments off the hook either. Under previous premiers, under the last 5 or 6 premiers, post-secondary institutions have lost funding, many of them to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Sure.
And you have to wonder if this is probably a big reason why the U of A is making this move.
Costco as well. I mentioned that last
is that right?
week. They haven't made any statement, but, rumors that they're reviewing their DEI policy as well. And this is all just kind of a wave that, it all ties into, the online presence stuff too with Zuckerberg and everything. Everything's kind of being reviewed. And I think the floodgates are going to kind of be not wide open, but they're definitely, the lock's going to be broken, and there's going to be some stuff spilling through here. Whether that's good or not, I don't think it's great. But we'll have to see what happens. And yesterday we had a great talk about some of that. Check out our episode yesterday with Amber Mack. But more so to the social media side, but just talking about all that stuff.
Gosh, she's smart, hey?
Oh, gosh, yeah. And then I was just in depth going into Zuckerberg's meet with Trump down in the States yesterday. And it's funny, this guy, he's kind of just, he's kind of like agreeing in advance, you know what I mean? Or going along, before Trump gets into office, which I think is weird because Mark's kind of always gone his own way. He's always kind of stood up for himself. If you watch the movie, which is pretty close to what actually happened when he created Facebook, it's kind of like that. But now I hear some stuff coming out of his mouth where I'm like, that's not really true. And it's kind of Trumpish. Like he said in an interview the other day, I think it was with Wired or something, that, I created Facebook as a way to give people a voice and social interaction and free speech. And I was like, dude, I've read your story. You created Facebook to rate girls when you were in university. It wasn't. There
were a lot of people in our live chat when we were talking to Amber Mack, and you can find that episode. It's called "Here's Why TikTok is About to Be Banned in the U.S." On YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. A lot of people in the chat were just saying Mark Zuckerberg stole Facebook. He stole Facebook. They made a movie about it.
But he's kind of he's repainting this narrative, and I'm like, dude, and his whole look has changed. He just looks like kind of like a, no offense, but he kind of looks like a bro now. The whole language about him has changed, so it's a really weird thing to see that flip from before being very inclusive of everyone, and now he's kind of like, he's complying in advance is what I meant to say.
Justin in our live chat, powered by Park Power, on the DEI front, and in my comments on that story out of the U.S., that case study on the individual that changed their name on their resume, says anybody that thinks it's possible for humans reviewing resumes to be completely fair and impartial are delusional. Says everybody has inherent bias, even if they don't recognize it. Justin, you are 100% correct. Iwana says, I need to anglicize my name all the time. She says, I've never really understood why an employer would be interested in my sexual orientation. Ytrium says DEI removes bigotry, racism, and prejudice. If you're against DEI, it's a strong indicator of what you're really for. It's interesting. Like, I want to share my opinion on this, but I also recognize that I'm a straight middle class white guy. So it's kind of like,
oh hey,
take my
me too.
Here, two straight middle aged.
But I also think that's why we should be speaking the loudest, right?
Yeah. Sure, and I just want to say that I want to be very clear that I acknowledge that there have been discrimination has been at play for a long time in a lot of industries regarding access to post-secondary institutions, regarding access to community funding, regarding like a million things. That's obvious. And I think that's why when, if I say I acknowledge my privilege here, it'll set people off. That's even something you can say that will trigger people. But I do think that it's important to acknowledge that I come, my perspective on life, like anybody else's, is shaped on their personal experience. And so I understand and I recognize that, you talk to, let's say, for example, female police officers. That would be one example. You talk to a lot of people and they'll say, well, like if I'm, being held hostage and like, and then I'm not sure I want, I don't even know if I need to get into the hypotheticals of what people would say. Firefighters would be another example. Well, if I'm like at the top of a burning building and I need to be carried down a ladder, I'm not sure I want, But then you talk to people like in policing and they'll say, well, like number one, there's a lot of women, non-binary officers, whatever, that are like very capable physically, number one. And number two, policing, as an example of an industry, is not just all about brute force. Like there's also a lot of things that, and again, we're speaking in big generalities here, but there's a lot of things that like women bring to the table that men might not.
Well, you're not always dealing with
diverse police force. It's important to have Indigenous officers, in particular in Indigenous communities, but everywhere. It's important for young kids, young Black kids, and young Jewish kids, and young Muslim girls, and like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can give 100 examples. young kids to be able to see themselves reflected in people working in certain industries. That's absolutely 100% important. And on the flip side, you also need to acknowledge that if you're like, and you see this a lot of times, I think maybe the language more in Republican circles down in the United States, where like young white boys, and I guarantee somebody now is going to tweet at me and, who's the one that's not thinking about the white, but like as a fact, they need to see opportunity as well. And so you need to find this balance where you look at some of the pushback on DEI and why is that? Because a big element of the population probably feels like now they're going to be overlooked if they're the most qualified for the job, because the job is not the job is not being filled based on who's most qualified for the position.
Well,
and that's one of the biggest problems optically with DEI is it gives people the impression, and it's whether it's fair or not, it gives people the impression that the right person is not being considered for the job, that the job is being filled by somebody that's ticking a box as opposed to the most qualified for the job. And that is not the premise of it. That's not the spirit of it. The spirit of it is equal access to opportunity, which we must demand,
People are always yelling about who's best for the job. Well, if someone who's best for the job is someone who maybe the person hiring can't pronounce their name, is that fair? Like you were just talking about someone having to change their name just to try and, get a job because they felt they were qualified. But also, like, I like to work in inclusive spaces. I don't want to come to work and see a bunch of guys that look like us, white guys with beards walking. I want to see women. I want to see men. I want to see different races, cultures. I want to talk to people, who can speak different languages. I want to be around a diverse group of people every day because I feel like it heightens my experience. And then every day you're learning something new. Yeah. And then when you go into other spaces, that's what I was going to say earlier. It really helps you. It really educates you. It really helps you become comfortable going into other spaces where you're around those people more. If you go home and everyone looks like you and your family and your friends, and then you go to work and everyone looks like you, and then all of a sudden you're in a space, maybe it is for work, where you go out in a field or you go to you go to someone's house or you go to a job site, and those people you're not normally around are there. You're not going to know how to, you're just going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to know how to interact. It elevates your whole life experience. Why would you not want this?
This is one of the big arguments for public school. It's honestly one of the big arguments 100%. For public school, right? Your kids are going to be around kids from different backgrounds, and your kids are going to grow up like with a friend circle and with an awareness outside of your own household. And I think that's probably why some families, quite frankly, are threatened by it as well. If we're being real. Hey, speaking of mispronouncing names, I did my best, but based on the last name, but it's not Iwana, it's Ivana. So my apologies, Ivana. I'm happy and I'm appreciative of the correction here. So how about this from Tara Lynn? Really interesting comment. She says, when I was married, I had a Japanese last name, said it never occurred to me that it was part of my job struggle until it was pointed out to me by a recruiter. Says Tara Lynn, who says, by the way, that's not why I changed my name back. Appreciate you clarifying. We also have an interesting comment here out of nowhere, but I don't mind bringing this up because this is making news. This is a lot of people are talking about this. Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, appearing on
Jon Stewart.
Saying that, it was a smart move on his part. And I just checked it the other day. It's sort of not formally announcing his leadership race, his bid for the leadership of the Liberal Party, but essentially announcing it and appearing with Jon Stewart. I don't know if that was in response to Jordan Peterson interviewing Pierre Poilievre, and maybe the two of them. Maybe this is like Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney having a bit of a pissing contest, seeing who can get the bigger audience, seeing who can get the bigger interview.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this.
It was more
Jordan
entertaining.
Peterson. Jordan Peterson is Canadian. Mm-hmm. Jon Stewart is not Canadian.
No.
Does it matter to you at all? Real talkers, does it matter to you at all that Mark Carney appeared on an American talk show with, I believe Jon Stewart has 14 Emmys, a 15-time Emmy winner. Let's acknowledge. Mm-hmm. Jon Stewart's the man. He's amazing. I love him. He's brilliant. But do you think it was the right or wrong move to go on an American talk show to kickstart conversation about your leadership to hopefully be the next Prime Minister of Canada?
Well, when I first saw it, I'm like, the audience is a little askew here. Like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me.
Feels like a bit of a weird move, doesn't it?
But at the same time, like, who other than like, this hour, like, what are you going to go to in Canada to stand up to someone like Jordan Peterson, right? Like, it's equivalent, but yeah, it's a little off because, the majority of the audience is American. But at the same time, love Jon Stewart. Great writer, brilliant, does a bunch of things behind the scenes other than, comedy and writing and obviously television and production and all that. But can you imagine him and Peterson sitting down? And I know people will be like,
Carney?
No, Jon Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
Because
that'd be amazing.
people often say, well, Jon Stewart goes to like comedy to try and deflect in interviews. But at the same time, it's not, it's not unintelligent comedy. It's very witty. It's very to the point. I mean, he almost ruined Tucker Carlson's career back in the day on his original show, where it was him and another guy. They went back and forth debating, and Jon Stewart came on there. I remember there was like, people were like, is he going to quit? Is he going to get fired? Because he just destroyed him on air. But yeah, it'd be great to see him and Peterson. But yeah, the Carney interview I watched, very entertaining. I think with the Pierre and Peterson, it's like two guys going back with talking points, kind of agreeing. Jon Stewart knows how to handle flow and keep it entertaining. I thought it was great.
I was a little surprised that Stewart did the interview because I think the average American doesn't know who Mark Carney is.
Yeah.
And you kind of think like you oftentimes in a host-driven show like any of them, like whether it was like on Ellen or Kimmel or like obviously any of these big shows, Bill O'Reilly, like whoever, the guests that are on obviously typically have a draw factor of their own, but you also look at like who will work well with the host and who will make the host look good. And I didn't have Mark Carney on Jon Stewart on my bingo card. So for that reason, I think it's a win for him. And I think it's a win that everybody in Canada is aware of it. And a lot of people in the United States now are like, who's this Mark Carney guy? Who does have an accomplished career, obviously. Whether or not he's going to be able to save the Liberal Party, whether or not he's going to win the leadership remains to be seen. But a lot of you here on the live chat, I appreciate this. Like Tony says, Jon Stewart has everybody on the show. He had Ted Cruz on, and others are saying, Donna says it was a great move, really large Canadian audience and so funny. Donna, you're 100% right. Like Jon Stewart has a huge audience. I guess you would also ask if you're going to have a real conversation. Michael here says, not at all. Jon Stewart's awesome. Definitely the right move given the daily drama with the U.S. right now. I guess to be fair to Mark Carney, you also have to ask, if you're trying to get, if you're like, I hate saying right wingers, left wingers, it just seems so polarizing. But if you're a conservative and you're trying to reach the biggest audience in Canada, you're probably going to try to get on Jordan Peterson's podcast. Like that's the biggest conservative platform in the country. Sure. It is by the numbers as a fact. Who's the progressive equivalent in Canada? To Jordan Peterson. There isn't one. No. Maybe this speaks a little bit to Jeremy Appel's comments on the dynamics in media. But although this is now maybe a little bit more, we're talking about independent media once you talk about our space, our wheelhouse podcasts and independent shows. But maybe that's part of the strategy that went into it for Carney's team. And I would imagine that Carney's team pitched the interview on Jon Stewart, not the other way around.
100%. I will say that, when I said I didn't understand why they did this because of the audience, I do actually. There is one point that, playing the long game, and especially nowadays, he goes on Stewart, his name gets out there in America, maybe Trump starts referencing him as the new guy who could go up against Pierre and could become leader. And then his name gets out there, right? And people start mentioning him, and that increases his exposure. That could be one of the chess moves that this was doing, right? When you go out into America, I mean, Trump's on X, Trump's on Truth Social, Trump sees these clips. He clicks on the liberal ones from Jon Stewart and whatever because he wants to hate on it. He wants to reshare and say they were wrong. So maybe he hears Carney's name. He starts mentioning him. Yeah. Now Carney's name is getting thrown around everywhere, right?
Yeah. Vamp says, I wouldn't be surprised if the Daily Show skit was a scripted infomercial. Come on, guys. Come on. Says they played their roles and timed their lines a little too slickly.
Wise Kyle says, it was obvious it was a paid-for interview. False.
False. Tracy says, Jon Stewart also has a huge online following, not so much the other talk show hosts.
True,
Miss Katie says it was 100% the right move.
That's what
considering
I mean,
the rhetoric about Canada becoming the 51st states and the outlets like Fox platforming right-wing Canadians.
100%. Like on X today, I opened it up. Boom. The first thing I saw was Jon Carney and Jon Stewart. Carney and Jon Stewart. And there's a clip
Yeah.
of him asking him. And Jon Stewart is like, he knows most of his audience is American. So he's trying to explain like who this guy is. He's like, your leader resigned. He was the prime minister. And now you're coming into the Liberal Party to try and to eat. Like he's dumbing it down for them, right?
Okay, well, this from Michael. And Michael, I was kind of keeping my cards close to my chest because that's what we do in this line of work. But Michael says Real Talk should have Mark Carney on as a guest. I have an update on that. But first, I want to let you know that Friesen Brothers this year, 2025, is a huge one for them. They're celebrating their 70th anniversary. Absolutely amazing. Still family owned in 16 different Alberta communities. They've got a ton of stuff going on, including that Alberta Reuben sandwich. That's one of Mike's meals this month. I told you I had my Friesen Brothers steak sandwich for lunch the other day. It's like $17 for a AAA steak, sauteed onions, an incredible steak sauce, and a fresh potato salad on the side. Are you kidding me? You could swap in fries as well if you want. It's just one of the many reasons why our family goes to Friesen Brothers to put the food on our table. I experienced that lunch, to me, I'm sitting there going, why on earth would anybody go to one of these fast food spots like just down the road where the cost is going to be the exact same when you can get a steak sandwich at Friesen Brothers? If you would rather put that stuff on your table at home, check out their Family Essentials flyer. Absolutely amazing quality food options for low prices every single day. You can view that flyer online at friesen.com. California Closets is in the business of custom closets, custom storage solutions for the entire home, and this is the time of year where their design team is ready to get you that free consultation because they know that people have these New Year's resolutions. You meant it when you made it at the end of December. You promised yourself you were going to get organized. You were going to do something with that space that's being underutilized or even wasted right now. It could be a stairwell. It could be a boot room. It could be your laundry room, your guest room, your primary bedroom, or even your garage. California Closets does it better than anybody else. They can work with any budget, and every installation is guaranteed for life. You can request that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. And before we get to this Mark Carney rumor mill, I also wanted to let you know, there's no rumor here. This is fact. Kubi Energy is hiring right now. They're looking for installers. These are ticketed electricians or apprentices, salespeople, office managers to work in their offices in Alberta and BC. They've got a beautiful headquarters in Edmonton, same with Calgary. They're down in Lethbridge as well, and Kamloops, serving residents across Western Canada. You can learn more about their story. I love this. Kubi Energy, born out of a shared vision between two friends who left their careers in mining and oil and gas to champion a cleaner, more sustainable future. If that resonates with you and you'd love to learn more about joining this team, check out the careers link today at kubi.ca.
Love the Coobs.
Yeah, amazing to see those guys. I was telling you, I hosted their holiday party, the Kubi Christmas party, after Real Talk signed off for the year. And hearing the numbers, it's not my business to share publicly. I don't know if they share publicly, but the revenue growth and the number of installations. When I tell you that they're doing more solar installations than anybody else in Western Canada, that's a fact. And it's incredible, the growth of that company. So they really deserve a big shout out. So here's the deal. So Mark Carney is expected to announce, and if you stick around to this point in the episode, you deserve this, the Real Talk Rumour Mill. Mark Carney is expected to make an announcement in Alberta's capital city, in our home city of Edmonton, tomorrow. So that's going to be the, what's today, the 15th? So that'll be the 16th of January in Edmonton. And so we obviously have an ask in with his team. We want to talk to him, whether or not he's coming to Edmonton just to talk about how much he loves the prairies, how proud he is to be from Edmonton, how proud he is to have graduated high school in Edmonton, to essentially have started his journey toward becoming Governor of the Bank of Canada, Governor of the Bank of England, et cetera, and ultimately maybe the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada in Edmonton. Remains to be seen. That's what I think that an informed person might speculate around, but I can't confirm that. There's also some rumblings that Mark Carney may be interested, and this is just the Real Talk Rumor Mill. Take it for what it's worth. Don't bet your house on this, but it's intriguing, isn't it, that Mark Carney may consider running in the next federal election in the riding of Edmonton Centre. Now, to put anybody on the spot, do you happen to remember who the current member of Parliament is in Edmonton Centre? It's
No.
not the other Randy, but it is Randy Boissonneau, a Liberal cabinet minister up until a short while ago, right? Appeared on this show many, many times. One of two
Randy's.
Liberal.
I'm just kidding. I had to. Sorry. Keep going.
I'm not sure how many Randys there are. There's at least two Randys. One of several Randys, but one of only two Liberal MPs in the entire province of Alberta. George Chahal, the other one down in Calgary, right? They had four the election previous, if I remember correctly. I'm going off the top of my head. Now, conventional wisdom and common sense suggests that the Liberals are going to get swept in Alberta. They're going to get swept in Saskatchewan. They might get swept in other provinces as well. I mean, some people are forecasting they're going to win like 5 seats. I don't know if they're going to win 5, but they're going to win way fewer than they won last election, put it that way. And that was a minority government for context and perspective. Would Mark Carney, I was debating this with a friend the other day, and he was saying to me, are you going to get Carney on the show on Thursday? I said, we've obviously got the ask in. But I'll let you know, Real Talkers, like if it happens, it happens, and you'll hear it here first. But would Carney risk his political future running in a riding? Edmonton Centre has sent a Liberal to Ottawa before on several different occasions, but they've also sent Conservatives, right? James Cumming was a Conservative MP. Laurie Hahn was a Conservative MP. And so I know that some people might find that to be a little bit risky for Mark Carney if he wants to be the Liberal leader to run in Edmonton Centre. I see Sharon right now in our live chat says, "Oh no, what about Tricia?" She's talking about Tricia Estabrooks, who's the NDP candidate that's going to be running. She's the NDP nominee. Tricia Estabrooks, former chair of the Edmonton School Board, Edmonton Public School Board, and a former journalist at the CBC. They've also got the Conservatives, and I have to apologize to this young fella, but the Conservatives have a candidate in there that won the nomination, and I know a lot of people were excited about his prospects. I should Google that and show him the proper respect, but CPC candidate, Edmonton Centre. I think that sort of took, it's Saeed Ahmed. Saeed Ahmed is the and I'm showing him here right now on my screen, Johnny. He's the Conservative candidate. He won the nomination race in Edmonton Centre for the Conservatives, beating out James Cumming, who I don't speak for James, but I think that James's supporters were a little surprised. I think they were a little taken back by that. Saeed ran a strong campaign, has a background in the United Conservative Party, in the provincial party, and so I know that the Conservatives were pretty jazzed up, pretty excited about his prospects. So you have a strong NDP candidate. You have, as far as I know, I don't know much about Mr. Ahmed, but appears for all intents and purposes to be a strong candidate for the Conservatives. Do you, at a moment, when it comes to federal politics in Canada, where the Liberals are getting absolutely blasted, they're getting sort of like toasted with the flamethrower every time anybody talks about them. You even look at the public discourse around the federal leadership campaign, the Liberal leadership campaign, and it's not like the average Canadian, including Liberal supporters, believe that with a simple change of leadership, they can keep the government together. They can form the next government, that a Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland or a Prime Minister Mark Carney or a Prime Minister, whoever it's going to be, Anita Anand or Melanie Joly or whoever, like the list goes on and on and on, that they could be Prime Minister. Like not even Liberals are saying that. It's obvious. And so I just feel that were Mark Carney to run, and if he were to be the favorite, one of the more recognizable names, maybe one of the more credible names that would enter the race, would he risk it all by running in Edmonton Centre, right? If you're seeking the leadership of the party and then you lose in the election, you lose a seat, the optics of that are obviously brutal. And then you got to find a way to get your leader into the House, and what happens there? Somebody steps down, you got to have a by-election. Like, it would be an absolute nightmare. So here's what I'm guessing. Here's my guess. And maybe I'll be proven to be wrong. If Mark Carney is going to be delivering a speech in Edmonton tomorrow on Thursday, my belief is that he will be declaring his intent to seek the leadership of the Liberal Party, but I doubt that he would announce that he's going to seek a seat for the Liberals in Edmonton Centre. And I don't even know the hoops he'd have to jump through anyway. I would imagine there'd be a nomination contest and he'd have to get that figured out. But this is the Real Talk Rumour Mill at work. Do not bet your house on it. Do not put any money down on this. But of course, you can text it out to all your friends right now, to all your different group chats, and see how it lands. Let us know what you think about that. And of course, we always want to hear from you as well. If you think I'm out to lunch or bang on, talk@ryanjespersen.com is where you can send us your emails. The inbox open 24 hours a day, including for submissions to the Flamethrower, our favorite 5 minutes of the week. We wrap up every Friday episode courtesy of our amazing friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. I recommend you try a Flamethrower burger, by the way, Johnny. I'll tell you, it's one of the stars, the Flamethrower, one of the absolute shining stars of their signature stack burger menu. That's the Flamethrower at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. As we wrap this show, a reminder that we have spots for 2 more teams at the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic coming up Saturday, February 1st in the beautiful city of St. Albert. Check out our website, ryanjespersen.com, on the events link with pond hockey, pretty self-explanatory, and that's where you can sign up your team. A maximum of 6 skaters. We get it all going around 9:30 in the morning with the national anthem, and then beers, bonfires, burgers, and more. We hope to see you there.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.